Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Microsoft Spotlight podcast. I'm joined once again by my co-host, Sophie Dimolo. How you doing, Sophie? You're right.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, good. Thanks, John. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. This is the second recording you've had today. Have you changed your clothes or anything? Or...
No, I haven't. I haven't at all. And it's a Friday as well. I feel like I'm mentally drained, but I'm here. We're doing it. It's been really positive, so I'm sure this one will be as well. I should have changed my jumper. I didn't even think.
Everyone would just think that you wear the same clothes.
Literally, the exact same hair, the exact same clothes. No, I've done two today, guys. That's why.
Cool. And today we are joined by Stephanie Stasey. Stasey, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about what you currently do, who you're working for, and we'll go from there.
Hi, my name's Stephanie Stasey. I am a principal CSAM, so that's a customer success account manager at Microsoft UK. I work in the health tech team across M365, Power Platform, and then 3 of Azure stacks, so infrastructure, apps, and AI. I have a background in health and digital transformation.
Nice. How did you get to start working for Microsoft?
How I got to start working for Microsoft, because I've only been here a year, is I was working in an IT MSP. Okay. I was head of automation and looking after some charity clients, so Mind, teenage cancer, mental health matters primarily. And then I built a PowerApp, and that PowerApp saved lives in mental health triage, and that resulted in me speaking at Scottish Summit and DynamicsCon and then getting headhunted into Microsoft.
Wow, well done. What a great achievement.
Awesome. So what was it? So you were speaking at the Scottish Summit last year, was you?
Yep, and then I'm booked to speak in Manchester in August too.
Awesome. So am I. Yeah, I spoke first time last year, and yeah, been accepted again this year. So no doubt I will run into you now.
Yes.
And what is it that you're going to be speaking about?
How my first PowerApp saved lives, and how we can plan your solutions to have better impact.
So was there anything specific that made you want to get into the charity sector and the NHS, and or did you just fall into it?
So I started off nearly 20 years ago. I did a degree in English, and then I went to work at Sky TV in operations, and then within about 6 months I was working in projects, so IT change essentially, and loved it and never wanted to leave projects and account management. So I spent my entire career doing that. And then about 5 years ago, I ended up picking up a contract in social care, and then another. And then the pandemic struck, and because I was contracting, I didn't have a job for a little bit. And then someone very close to me took their life, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. So I decided the right thing to do was to find a way to move from social care into mental health to try and have a greater impact. So I ended up going into a mental health charity at the time because I thought that was the place I could have the greatest impact. And then I just kind of hoped that somebody would ask me something that enabled me to have an impact. And sitting there long enough and listening and being willing to go and learn the Power Platform thing enabled me to achieve that goal of helping somebody who otherwise may well not have made it.
Yeah, well, I'm really sorry for your loss, and obviously this has had such a positive impact from where you are now and how well you've done and taken something, you know, not so great into helping people and saving lives. So yeah, absolutely amazing achievement.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm running through your LinkedIn, and like I do most of halfway through most podcasts, and you've had like a lot of interim IT director roles in the past 4 years, 5 years.
So some of those were just on one contract. So some of those were via an MSP. I had a lot of fractional roles at the same time. So I was in mental health matters and Mind and teenage cancer and some other charities all at the same time.
Wow.
Kind of like half days, 2 days a week, making up my week, which was lovely and varied. And useful, I suppose, when you're in kind of those sorts of roles, because it enables you to do something somewhere and then to reference what you're doing and potentially discuss that kind of best practice in another.
Yeah.
So what I was going to ask from that was like you've obviously had a lot of different experiences in such a small short period of time and stuff. How has that kind of like helps you whilst now at Microsoft, like working for the past year at Microsoft and stuff? Has that kind of enables you to have like a new way of thinking whilst working with lots of different charities?
I think the role at Microsoft is broad across all of the NHS and lots of the Department of Health and Social Care organisations. So there's over 20,000 organisations that fit into that space. And because I've been at some of those organisations in different roles, in different pieces of that puzzle, I think that really helps me when we talk about what it is that an IT director in an organisation as part of the NHS would experience and some of the roles and profiles that are related to it. So for me, it gives me some breadth across the customers of NHS England and the customers of Microsoft.
Yeah. And how are you finding it working at Microsoft in general?
There's a lot. I think before I came, I was confident that I knew I was confident that there were parts of the stack that I knew really, really well, and the breadth of the offering at Microsoft and the amount of change and the number of acquisitions of software is enormous. Like trying to understand everything that we do in healthcare is a lot. Some people call it drinking from the fire hose when they first join Microsoft because there's so much. There's 9 different options of kind of streams of education for you. So for formal exams, that in itself is a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an awful lot of learning, and there's a lot of network, and there's lots to do. Yeah, there's that real breadth. I think is challenging even for me when I'd had quite a lot of breadth before this.
Yeah.
But I mean, it's a wonderful organisation to work for. It makes me really proud to put on my Microsoft jacket when I go out to see the customer. And it still gives me the sector experience that I thrive in and the ability to add value across lots of parts of healthcare and lots of pockets. So it's a wonderful job. It's a really broad job.
Yeah, and I can imagine. I mean, I could be wrong, but after a year, you still feel like you've got loads to learn, and it's still sort of new and that exciting feeling. Is that the case?
I think things like OpenAI and the breadth of opportunities that's starting to bring across the product stack and things like Copilot kind of feel like, oh, I just got it. Like I just nailed it. I understood the breadth of everything that we were doing. And then everything keeps changing almost weekly now.
Yeah.
So I think it's a thrilling place if you have kind of a growth mindset and you like learning. But there's a lot going on. So it's hard to feel confident in every single product stack that we've got.
Yeah, I think even so, I work for Geocom and I'm one of the account directors there, and we work closely with Microsoft because obviously we resell to MSPs, but even for like our Microsoft product managers, it's constantly changing, which means then they're now teaching us, and we have monthly updates, don't get me wrong, and we try and keep in the loop as much as possible. But I can imagine for you being the person in the midst of all of that, it's even, not say worse because it's a great experience, but I can imagine it's a lot.
It's full on, but then the opportunity is amazing.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think by the time this podcast is out, I think I've moved roles. I'm not too sure. Hopefully it's after the 5th of May. But I've recently left CDW I just feel really weird. But I'm at CDW at the moment as we're recording, but I might have left. So Andrew, leave this out actually, just in case. But yeah, can I just go back a bit? Let's go back to kind of like school times. What was it that kind of you wanted to grow up and do? What was the plan for yourself, for your future self?
Goodness. Okay, so when I was younger, I really wanted to work in journalism, which is why I ended up at the BBC and then at Sky. And originally, I wrote my undergraduate dissertation in acceptable women's work according to women's glossy magazines.
Right.
And then I turned down a job at a large magazine company because I felt like it was the wrong thing. I didn't want to be there. So instead, I went to BBC Watchdog for a little bit in the consumer unit, and I was a runner for a little while, trying to figure out what I was going to do and what made me feel okay about the world, because I didn't want to be part of a problem. So then I applied for a graduate scheme at Sky, and then very quickly ended up in projects, and then realised that I loved the ability to impact, make change, take people on that change journey and make things better. And I was like, okay, I like this. This is sticky, it's interesting, it's problem solving, it's technical, but it's people-y. So it seemed to tick all of those boxes. So yeah, I kind of transitioned from a ambition that I would be a journalist into doing a lot of project stuff, but I couldn't imagine going back.
No, so do you definitely feel like it's the right decision, the right path you went down?
I love my job. I feel genuinely privileged. I bounce out of bed in the morning knowing that I get to work in health tech. And for me, that's one of the coolest things in the world. It's constantly changing. It's full of variety. And I think it's a great opportunity to impact things that are important to me. So in my undergraduate degree, there was some feminist sociolinguistics. Now I work in a space where 77.6% of the workforce is female, 25% of the workforce is ethnic minority. And it means that nudging people who aren't very comfortable in tech towards tech, who fit into some of those cohorts, is a positive thing for me to have an impact in the world, as well as hopefully some of the tech that we introduce has genuine impact on the whole of the UK's health.
Yeah, I mean, I'm reading through also your kind of stuff that you sent over to us. So obviously people are aware who listen to this frequently. We send over a questionnaire to kind of get some thoughts over. And one of the things that we asked you was challenges you faced being a woman in tech. And you sent back quite a strong answer. I don't know if it's the right word to use, but like it's quite harrowing at like some of the things that you've had to do to kind of like whilst being the woman IT. So sometimes when we ask our guests this question, it's quite some people from other countries don't kind of have some of the same experiences that you've had. And like one of the things that really does strike out to me, you changed your surname to be more Western.
Yes. So my name is Stephanie Stasiuk, which is Ukrainian. It's a difficult conversation to start at work right now in the current political environment.
Yeah.
But previously, I'd had some challenges with people having an opinion of me that I should go back home, when actually my grandfather came here. All of my grandparents came here. My maternal grandmother was a nurse. And I think for me, that thing of that expectation that if you have an Eastern European name, you've stolen someone's job and you should go back home is tough. When that's then layered on top of being female and somebody going, oh, are you looking for a husband? Are you a Ukrainian bride? I think some of that stuff is still really ingrained in our culture. And I think the assumption for some people is that that's already gone away and been solved and it's okay. But actually, when you start looking into the data, the number of times you don't get a response to an email if you happen to fit into certain criteria. And when you layer those on top of each other, because we all intersect in different ways, some people have a much tougher experience than I do, but some people are less aware of how that impacts them because they haven't had the luxury of studying language in society in a way that I have, which is both a blessing and a curse, because you can see what's really happening, but also most of the people around you have no idea what it is that you can see, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if you've got any family and stuff over in Ukraine, I'm guessing you have for the moment, like thoughts out and prayers with them and stuff like that. And it's horrible. What's been happening over there for the past year. But yeah, so some of the bits that you've also wrote as well as that bit there. I was just saying you never felt like you belong in the room.
I think if you, particularly in some circumstances, and particularly when you get into like architecture and infrastructure conversations, then I'll often be in a room where I'll be the only female. Yeah. And that is not uncommon at all, regardless of sector. I've worked across numerous sectors, and often you're the only woman in the room. And I often look younger than other people in the room. Doesn't mean I necessarily am. Not sure everybody's the biggest fan of Botox, but Ukrainian women, it's an important part of our culture. So
you look great. You look great.
So I think that's a challenge, because you walk in and someone assumes that you don't belong, and then they start talking about things that aren't hugely interesting to you. They're talking about some football match that I don't have any contextual reference to, and you're outside of the club, if that makes sense. Like, everybody else is kind of in a space where they have lots of common interests and lots of common things to talk about, and you don't. And sometimes there's a huge blessing that people will make a conscious effort to include you, and sometimes they won't. And I think through that 20 years of working in every sector in lots of different places, there's been different experiences of that. But I think it is still harder for me and many other people to kind of fit in the same way, be included in the same way, and for it to be as easy as it is if I had a different appearance to get on and be successful in some environments.
Yeah, I mean, I completely get it. I think it's just sad, isn't it? And it's also crazy that it's still something that we need to talk about. We've spoken to so many women, and they're in the same situation. They might be in an architect position or some sort of other position where they're quite high up, and they're still the only woman in the room, and they still don't feel like they can have a say and all that sort of stuff. Do you have any involvement in the women in tech community, Stephanie?
That's a great question. So I am connected to some people in Women in Dynamics, and also I just did a piece. So I was just one of the delegates for UN Women UK's commission on the status of women 67, which took place in New York, which I dialed into virtually. So because the priority theme on that was about included and excluded women around the tech piece, then there were lots of other people in the tech, women in tech kind of community space, heavily involved in those conversations. So I think in those spaces, yes. In Leeds tech, starting to get into that a little bit, but not especially. I think there are different groups and communities with different understandings of the women in tech and the intersectionality pieces, and some of them are more mature than others. And I think sometimes that's a challenge if you've done the reading, because sometimes you're in a room and everybody gets it and you think that they're kind of having the same conversation as you, and then sometimes it doesn't quite feel like feminism can still be a dirty word in some of those environments. Like, people will not want to call themselves a feminist, or they'll want to talk about things that aren't necessarily what I would see as kind of where we're aiming to be in fourth wave feminism. So I think there's a challenge of where we are and who's done the reading as to which groups I kind of feel like I can add value to, and which groups I would kind of feel like it doesn't quite, I don't quite fit, or my opinion isn't quite where everybody else's is. And I think there's a challenge in that, because I don't want to turn up and feel like I have to educate other people in order for them to understand some of the intersectionality pieces. But then other people are much further along. There's plenty of people in UN Women UK who are much more mature than me on this journey.
Yeah.
And there's a lot to do. There's a lot of reading to do. There's a lot of understanding to do, so that we're all in the right place to understand what the problem is and how we can all help fix it.
Yeah.
So that was a long answer.
No. I completely get where you're coming from. So do you think that it is more about educating women in a sense, so that we can all come together and, you know, make changes and put changes in place? Or do you think the majority is about educating men and, you know, the leaders that maybe put females in uncomfortable positions and all that sort of stuff? Where do you think that lies, or where do you think the line is?
I think similarly to some of the Black Lives Matters conversations, the reality is we all need to be much, much better at understanding how everybody intersects and what other people's lived experiences are. And I think looking at the binary male, female, and people who are in the trans community piece as like simply, and not layering on top of that all of the other ways in which people are included or excluded, misses the bigger picture of the fact that you never turn up just with one of those identities. You turn up in your entirety with all of that playing out all at the same time. And I think that's hard sometimes to get across to everybody, because there's a lot you have to understand in order to be able to do that.
Yeah. No, I completely get where you're coming from. And it's a different perspective, to be honest, than, you know, what I've heard before, what I've spoken to other women about, but I completely get where you're coming from. What do Microsoft do then? Because I know that they do a lot around diversity, inclusion. Have you been involved in any of that? Have you seen or experienced anything different from the other organisations you've worked for?
I think that, Microsoft pride themselves in working on diversity, inclusion, and working towards that belonging space. And I think there are some really strong allies in that space. Similar to lots of other large, especially tech organizations, there is a responsibility to make sure that hiring people that are driving decision making is as inclusive as possible, because how else do you empower every person and every organization on the planet to achieve more if you're excluding certain groups of people? So I think Microsoft are really proactive in that space. But there's an awful long way to go in terms of understanding the complexity and the challenges that people experience. And I think Microsoft are doing what they can in that space, but there's an awful lot for us all to take ownership of, and particularly if you think about responsible AI and how groups of people are excluded or included or not have a seat at the table across what is a huge change in technology and impact. And by not having diverse women at the table, it means that it's more likely that groupthink of what is predominantly white men in some of these spaces is the only kind of narrative, rather than it being a broader, wider, more inclusive and more reflective of our community group of people who will have differing experiences. And that life experience can really shape how we're thinking about the impact of some of the decisions that we're making. So I hope across the technologies where Microsoft is working, that conscious inclusion is driving better work and meaning that we're getting closer to where we aspire to be, but there's still work to do.
Yeah, which again, I completely agree. So just going back, now you're at Microsoft, you're a customer success account manager. What does your day-to-day, and I know it's probably very, very different each day, but usually what does your day-to-day look like?
It's a series of meetings, responding to emails, looking after important and urgent things. So responsible for a real breadth of stuff, from looking at M365 and where somebody is and the maturity model on that piece, with some CSMs, to looking at the impact of our platform, to considering the sitting and working out, like discussing machine learning and what the next steps of a project might be in that space, to sitting in an infrastructure session, to looking at some of the community pieces in terms of our impact. So really varied in terms of stakeholders, responsibilities, breadth of role, technologies. But just that really common thread, I think, in the CSAM role is customer leadership and ensuring that that account management and customer success piece is the center. So how do you ensure that you are helping that customer go on their technology journey in the best possible way, and kind of ensuring that their operation is moving in the right direction?
Yeah. And what would you say a couple of your career highlights were?
Definitely building a PowerUp that
I think that's the top one.
That saved 82 minutes per referral in triage and has saved lives.
Yeah.
That is a huge achievement. What else? Being part of the leadership team of one of the largest ERP implementations in the world. That was a huge achievement. And offering consultancy at the moment in some of the most interesting health tech programs that are happening.
Yeah, I think they're pretty big ones. They are. So this PowerUp then that you created, can you talk about what it was, what it does, how it helps people?
So in talking therapy in the UK, there's about 1 million referrals a year.
Okay.
Or there was in 2021. And we realised where I was working before. So a couple of days a week, I was the IT director at Mental Health Matters in Sunderland. And we realised that the waiting list was ever growing for people who had identified in the pandemic that they were really struggling either to feel comfortable with going outside and the risk of someone coughing on them, or for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
People were feeling more and more anxious or more and more depressed. So more people, and they were scoring when they were analysed, they were scoring that they were feeling significantly worse than on average the smaller group of people were before. So it's a really big concern that the rapid increase in the number of people referring and the significant worsening of that. And in reality, there were no more practitioners to help them. Everybody in the country was working.
Right.
That everybody that could was working on this stuff. So the waiting list just kept going up, and there wasn't any viable way of training more people when they were in a lockdown to resolve that problem. So someone said to me, what can we possibly do? So I looked at the technology that they had, and there wasn't very much that we could do there. And then all of a sudden it occurred to me, forms to Power Automate to Planner would be something I could just sit and figure out. I'd seen a few bits and I was like, I'm just going to see what I can do and sit there tonight and make this happen, because nothing else is going to change. And I spent 2 evenings doing that. And then we had something. So we played with it and piloted it internally. And then we agreed that it was ready, and we sent it out to 10 people, and it worked. So then I reached out to a partner who does Power Platform and dynamic stuff, and just asked them, because I had no time in my work day.
Yeah.
And my work day was full. I already had a bunch of customers and a bunch of programs to deliver, and said, we made this, here's our proof of concept, here's our process map that I'd drawn, here's our form, here's what we're doing in Planner, can you just bring this to life? And within 2 weeks, the partner they understood the implication. They understood the genuine risk to life and the implication of it. They just came back and made something. During that time, the supplier of the legacy software came back and said, look, there's nothing we can do for 2 years. We don't have the capacity to do anything for you. Because what you have to remember on Power Platform is how fast you can now build because it's low code.
Yeah.
So it gives you freedom to go fast, but also because 7 million people in the world can use it.
Yeah.
It means that you can go and find somebody with the skill set to come and help you when you want to do something richer and you want to be confident that the security layer's there and everything else is in place. Like, you can do something in your own space and feel comfortable, but when you scale it up and there's risk around it, you want to be sure for certain that somebody has considered all of the information governance piece around that, all of the data security, all of the privileges. So by using a partner at that time, it was the right thing for us to do in that small organization, because it gave me a lot of confidence that experts were picking that up, and someone just came and did that for us and gave us it back. And the impact was enormous. We were saving 82 minutes. That's over an hour of clinician and back office time per referral, as we just started churning through that backlog, whilst we were very aware that most of the rest of the country was that waiting list was ever increasing, was creeping up 6-9 months a year in places, and that's just not viable. If you've got to wait a year before somebody will talk to you and help you through, that's not a viable option. Whereas we were falling down that 6 months, 4 months, 2 months, 6 weeks, 4 weeks, whilst everybody else was going the opposite way.
Yeah.
So it really helped the teams in the organization feel less stressed, because all of a sudden, all of those people who were anxious about the waiting list, and they knew that when they were speaking to someone, they were going to feel even worse because they've been waiting even longer, that was starting to creep down. So the team's anxiety was falling because they knew that it would become an easier process for them to manage. Also, because people had pre-assessed themselves within 48 hours of them being seen, they knew what they were walking into. So when they joined a call with somebody, they already had a good steer on where that person was, which meant we could prioritize for the junior staff an easier kind of referral set, whereas people that we saw had scored in much more complex ways or at immediate risk could be triaged quicker or to somebody with more experience in that space.
Yeah, that's absolutely amazing work. It's mind-blowing, isn't it? And I can imagine the stress and just the stress of the team. I'd be the exact same, but that's bloody brilliant.
I think it's a wonderful thing to get to. I think during the pandemic and now in this horrible time, colleagues in the NHS are doing so much for all of us to take care of us. And I think we're all in a place now, after being asked to clap on our doorsteps, that we wished that we could do more.
Yeah.
And this was an opportunity for me to do that. And now the piece that I do with the Dynamics and Power Platform community called NHS Empower is an opportunity for other people in that space to come and have an opportunity to do things that will nudge people with problems and ideas in the NHS into that space where actually they go from having a problem to being empowered to being able to grab something tangible and do something. And I think the fact that people can see other people starting to do that piece, for me, that the opportunity for that's a really proud moment for me, to be able to do this thing with my friends that genuinely changes the experience of people who work on the front line, because it is tough and it won't solve all the problems, but if it can do a few of the bits and ease a bit of the pain, then that feels really powerful.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to say, Stephanie, was we haven't got too long left here, so conscious of. I wanted to ask you this question a while back and forgot was about your work in the community. Kind of like, how did you start speaking? Like, what made you start to want to speak at events, and yeah, what led you to that side of things?
I grew up in youth theatre, so I've always had that thing. But there's an echo. I grew up in youth theatre, so there's always been that thing where I felt comfortable public speaking. And then I did the Toastmasters International programme up until competition level in the UK. And then previously, I've been working with somebody in the dynamic CRM space, Areti, who I knew, who asked if there were any other female speakers to speak at Scottish Summit. And I knew I had that app. So I knew I had a thing that I needed to get out.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a skill. And somebody asked me. And I put those three things together and was like, okay, I'll apply for this thing, and got in. And then somebody reached out about Dynamics Con, virtual, and I spoke at that. And then I was just in the community. And then for South Coast Summit, the VP of PowerApps, Ryan Cunningham, was on stage with me and some people in NHS England talking about this NHS Empower work and the thing that I'd done previously and things that other NHS orgs had done in this space. And then that kind of just continued. He is on mute.
What is going on again?
My son's next to me, and he's sorry.
He's got his son next to him playing on the PlayStation.
Brilliant.
It's obviously all the kids are off, so Easter holidays. Do you have children, Stephanie?
I don't.
I don't either.
It's so quiet. I'm not going to lie. It is so quiet in my house. And then I go to my friends' houses. And it's not quiet.
Yeah.
Sorry, actually, no, it's Easter holidays, and my son's been sitting next to me today working. Like Friday, normally we have no childcare, so he sits and plays PlayStation next to me, and he needs to go to the toilet, so I had to open up the garage door. Garage door's really loud, and yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I guess, well, last question from me then. What does the future look like for yourself?
I would love to continue to do what I do. I think it is a huge privilege to get to work in health tech. I adore exploring lots of the new technology pieces and how they are impacting health and impacting the NHS. So for me, really more of the same. There's more of the same, more opportunity to have more impact, but there's no defined 5-year goal or like path or clear objective in terms of what I want to achieve, other than I love this. So more opportunities to grow my skill set and have more impact.
Yeah. And just one last one. And if there's any women on here that are wanting to get into health tech, what would your advice be?
Oh, that's a really complicated question, because it really depends on where you are now in that journey. If you're working in health already, because 10% of the population work in either the NHS or social care.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And actually more, because so much of that is female, that's bigger than 10% of women.
Yeah.
So if you're already working in health or social care, and you want to lean into things that are happening because tech change is coming, whether you want it or not, then there's probably lots of opportunities around you to lean into what's already happening and be part of that change and be a change champion for people around you, even without stepping out of your job and without too much disruption to what you do.
Yeah.
And or there are lots and lots of courses around these pieces. There's Microsoft Learn, you can go on for free, and you can choose to then sit exams in those things if that's where you want to go, or She Codes or STEMETs or Girls Who Code. I think there are so many programs, and some of them are funded depending on where you intersect, that you can take part in order to go and change careers. But I suppose how far do you want to go, and how far do you want to go now is an important question. So do you want to nudge yourself towards health tech gently from where you are? Do you want to go and do a program where you spend 6 months or you cover someone's maternity or something like that, because lots of women do those things? Or do you want to go and study in the evenings or around what you're already doing? Or do you want to just go into it? I suppose it really depends on where you are, what your aspirations are, and how your life fits around it, because women typically have more caring responsibilities than men on average currently. That's how the world works. So if you are a carer, or if you have children, or if you have both of those things, then it can be more complicated to do things like go to Azure user groups in the evening, or go away for the weekend to public speak at an event, or attend an event. And the reality is that we have to consider all of those things when we're telling other women what they could do.
Yeah. No, amazing answer, and thank you. I know it was a bit of a difficult one. There's such a wide range, isn't it, of options. But yeah, John, have you got anything else?
No, I think it's been a really insightful episode.
I do.
Yeah, another brilliant story, and Stephanie's been really good to meet you, and hopefully we'll see each other in August in Manchester.
That's super. Thank you so much.
Yeah, it's been great. It's been great to meet you, and thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome. Right, thank you very much. And if you haven't subscribed, like and subscribe us on YouTube, follow us on Spotify. This will be on again another fantastic story from Stephanie, and we'll have another one in 2 weeks' time. So speak to you guys later, and listeners, see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Microsoft Spotlight podcast. Please make sure you hit that like, share and subscribe button to help us promote our message. You can also follow us on Twitter at MSFT Spotlight, and we're also on LinkedIn, the Microsoft Spotlight podcast. And finally, we'd like to tell you a little bit about BitTitan and thank them for sponsoring this podcast.
Remote migrations start here. Let Migration Wiz do the work for you. It's fast, secure, and 100% SaaS, which means you can migrate at any time and from anywhere. Migrate mailboxes, documents, public folders, personal archives, or even Microsoft Teams with just a few clicks. No special training needed and no customer downtime. When the work matters, choose Migration Wiz.